Good evening, everyone. This is Miko Densinko, coming to you live to present another episode of the Tours Plaza Classic Recap. Last episode, we tackled round 3 and we covered round 4 predictions, even though that video is unfinished because OBS sucks. I had the whole video down, but they decided to cut right after the 6 predictions. So please, OBS, work this time. This time, we're going to cover round 4, all the matches that had happened, plus giving our round 5 predictions. So round 4 was a pretty interesting round. 7/8 of the game have been played, except for one, which will be extended. The tier this time was Oras, Monotype plus Kamamon, so any Kamamono players are in luck because they get to dominate this tier. But it's also Gen 6, which has Hidden Power plus Mega, so it's infinitely better than Generation 8. Before we get to the tiers and all the matches that had happened, we'd like to talk about, of course, the extended game that happened between BasedWhat and Surreal. And wouldn't you know it, BasedWhat actually won, which was a surprise to us all. But evidence in the game shows that BasedWhat actually held his own against Surreal. So first up, we have Game 1. Game 1 was interesting. Both players played pretty well. There was a crucial poison on Yveltal, but I feel like Striel played that game better, consistently, more so throughout the game, which was very nice. Um, there were a couple of turns where was kind of been outpredicted, but got rewarded for it. It was a mostly back and forth game, although I will say BasedWhat had the bigger advantage of preserving Eternatus, which gave him the win because once once Toriel had no more options and everything was just weak to Eternatus, Eternatus kind of just swept him in the end. So that was an unfortunate first game. Second game was way better, even though it was much longer. Both players actually brought pretty good, unique sets, such as Roar Tyranitar and Sunsteel Swords Dance knockoff Necrozma Duskmane, which was very nice. Um, there was a lot of Ditto action as well, because Ditto kept impersonating Duskmane, which proved crucial in that game overall. Unfortunately, Star run out of Sunsteel strikes, and that proved his undoing. And kudos to BasedWhat for preserving Clef, which was the key that won him the series. Basically, after Necrozma was died down, um, BasedWhat had a Clef in the back, which enabled him to pick up the win by basically setting up and sweeping it. Very, very good. So BasedWhat knocked out Storiel in the tour, so mad respect. That goes to him for knocking out pretty much one of the favorites of the damn tour. So it's interesting. It's interesting now that Storiel is out. So let's now move on to the round on 4 itself and talking about all the matches that have happened now. So first up, we have Ainscrad versus Nate 5011. Thank God the run of Nate 5011 has ended thanks to Ainscrad's incredible play. Game 1 was just a major curb stomp. Point outclassed Nate. Nate couldn't get a Will-O-Wisp going. He tried to Will-O-Wisp a lot of Mons from Boyne's side, particularly the Garchomp with his Rotom Wash. Couldn't get it, so he was kind of hacks there. And yeah, Boyne really only needed Garchomp, Gudra, and Dragonite in order to sweep all of Nate's team. So it was pretty nice. Game 2, Nate brought a rain team, which on paper should destroy Boyne's team, but unfortunately, the bulk of the team doesn't matter if the player using it doesn't know how to properly, effectively using it. Nate kind of regretting that he should have kept Kingdra because uh, Kingdra under Rain would pretty much sweep all of Boyne's team. IMO. Um, Deoxys, though, being and carrying Thunderbolt, it basically swept through late game. Why is Deoxys unbanned from this tier? Please look into it, tier leaders. So yeah, Bullen win is a very dominant victory for Ainscrad. And moving on to the quarterfinals. Next up, we have 7U9I2 versus Instruct. And can I just say that I love Instruct's team names for his Pokemon? They're all Bible. If you didn't know, they were all Bible names. And Instruct basically wanted the power of God on his side. It was a fairly competitive game at the start of Game 1 until a crucial crit on Garchomp against Instruct's Aerodactyl, which basically sealed the deal for him. 7U9I2 basically had control for the rest of the game, utilizing all these different mons very effectively. And Instruct, while I kind of like the look of his team, really wasn't effective all that much. And so 7U9I2 basically had a good win there. Game 2, Instruct brought normal, or was it 7U9I2? Let's recheck. Because I think it was Instruct who brought mononormal. Yeah, Instruct brought mononormal, which I don't really like. It really isn't the best choice to bring, even with Camamons. Like, yeah, you got your normal Poison Chansey, you got your Ditto, you got your Mega Pidgeot. That's all fine and good, but it's not really that effective even though with a lot of type coverage, you can see here that 7U9I2's team is full of setup and sweep mons. Like, you got Alakazam, you got Latios, you got Mew, you got Reuniclus, and Victini as well. Um, it was a big advantage for 7U9I2 to basically carry all those set of sweeping mons. And Alakazam and Ditto switching, um, Alakazam and the Ditto switching basically carried 7U9I2 endgame. And 7U9I2 also had proper Zam setup and enabled him to win the game in that way. So it was a pretty dominant, I wouldn't say dominant win, but it was certainly a convincing win over Instruct, which is a pretty good ratio. All right, and next up, we have Mossy Sandwich versus Dan Demand99. One of the highlight matches of this matchup, Mossy won in 3. Uh, in a very interesting series, I will have to say. First off, game 1 had Grass versus Fairy, a very interesting matchup. I'm not a big fan of Grass in Oras Kamamano because they're very limited in terms of movesets and potential. Like, oh, who is the best mon for this tier? Practically these 6. So, in the end, it was nothing really much for this game. It was a very competitive series. Um, Breloom basically proved instrumental, sporing everything in Dan's team. Unfortunately, Slurpuff kind of just swept all of Mossy's team at the end, so Dan took game 1 that way. Game 2, Mossy played a much better game 2 and brought a much better team than the grass team from before. Or it was a psychic type team, this time with Deoxys Defense and Lati Twins, which have strangely not been banned yet. It was there were a couple of odd typing choices that I either went or eh. First of all, we had Dark Flying Mega Gyarados. Um, that was interesting. Bug Fighting Mew as well, and Bug Rock Empoleon. What? What kind of typing choices do you have? there was nothing really much to say there. Mossy just played a better game in general. There was really not much to say there. And game three opened with a banger because, as you may see here, in just probably the first couple of turns, Dan pulled off something that we've never ever seen before, which was a hyper beam. Turn one hyper beam by a normal fighting Cobalion. That was crazy. Easy. We would never expect Cobalion to just one shot Lando like that. Well, a very strong start there by Dan. Unfortunately, the next Pokemon to come out, Staraptor, was definitely a hard hitter. Definitely taking care of most of Dan's team, and it was a mostly solid game. However, the end game was a bit controversial. As you can let me just skim through the rest of the game because it was a mostly solid game. Nothing really too major to comment on, aside from the fact that Stereo Staraptor was a pretty good damage dealer here, and yeah, for example, that I'm guessing that's Choice Banded. I'm not really sure. However, okay, this end game, you got Zapdos against Mega Sizzle right here. Dan sets up a Swords Dance. Zapdos does Discharge and does a crit. Would Scizor or have one if Discharge just didn't crit right there? I'm guessing he would live at least one attack. Like, he could live at least the range of 32 right here. However, having to Bullet Punch Zapdos like that, how much will Zapdos take in order? Let me pose you that in the comments below, because I'm interested to see um, how much Scissor will actually do against Zapdos, and presumably everything else on Moxie's team will die to this Bullet Punch. So would Dan would have won? I don't know. Your thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Your thoughts. But yeah, Mossy ended up taking that series, and it was what it was. So next up, aside from a Euphanus over Konaluk activity win, Kithra versus Mamalu was next. First game, Psychic versus Psychic. And I think Mamalu actually played better in game one, albeit a couple of big moments. For example, the burn on the Medicham, that proved detrimental to Kither, especially because he needed Medicham to hit hard and take care of the Slowbro, the Latios, the Deoxys, the Gardevoir. He needed that Medicham, and unfortunately, getting burned really didn't do anything. Mom's Victini was the MVP of Game 1, bolt striking and V creating everything. Despite Kither having a Victini of his own, I think Mamalu utilized his Victini better, which gave him the win in Game 1. Game 2 was much more smooth sailing for Kither. Um, Megalopony was burned early, but Chansey's Heal Bell saved it, which, you need a Heal Bell for your physical attackers like Lopunny, Staraptor, Diggersby, even Ditto. Chansey this time was the MVP. Kither's Chansey, standing up against a mostly special endgame team. And then in the end, just Ditto Deoxys swept the rest of the game. It was a pretty good win there for Kither. Game 3, Kither brought a pretty interesting. I think it was Kither. He brought a pretty interesting Mega Arrow set, which I was a fan of. It had Frustration, Crunch, and Pursuit, and the last one was Roost. That was a really interesting Mega Arrow set. I really hope we see more of that. More of those creative sets sometime in the future. There was an imminent Slurp of Sleeve. Like, it was a basic guarantee that Mamalu was going to end up sweeping Kither's team with Belly Drum Slurpuff, but a Dragon Breath Salamence put a stop to that, paralyzing the poor Slurpuff, and in the end, just killing it. That was sad. Other than that, though, it was mostly even game. It was big back and forth battle with good plays and good predictions until a very crucial pursuit play destroyed Mamalu's momentum and sealed Kither's win in this series. So it was a very good series between Kither and Mamalu. More of that, please. Next that happened was BasedWhat versus Martin V Tran, and unfortunately, Martin V Tran lost, and BasedWhat moved on, which I was particularly sad about because I've been hella impressed with Martin all throughout this tour, and to see him go out like this, it's sad. So let's review the matchup, shall we? Now, first up, we had a normal Steel Dragonite from BasedWhat. Really the most ideal heal typing, to be honest. There is also a hidden power ground pound on Mega Charizard Y, which basically swiped out most of Martin's team, which had basically poison. Again, very niche, but it proved wonders, at least. I wouldn't say it didn't. So there was nothing really much else to say. It was just a very well played game from either side. There was a crit Dragon Pulse on the Land OT, but that was about it for at least for Haxes in game one. Game two, though, as you can see here from BasedWhat's uh, little one GG's post, that game two was pretty haxy. It was even early into the game. There was a lot of crits and there was a lot of status conditions being applied. Um, there was a crit. There were crits on Martin's Latias, which really didn't do anything, which made Latias basically useless. It was just cannon fodder for another Mon to sack, basically, and it was just overwhelming for Martin. And Alakazam focus missing was the last straw for poor old Martin because he couldn't really do much else, and that's why he forfeited game two. It was a sad way to go out for Martin. Game three did not help Martin's case at all. He was definitely like being triggered after all the hacks that had happened in game two. Um, Unfortunately, it was a bit more disruptive. He could have kept going and used Gallade and Deoxys more effectively to take out all of BasedWhat's team. However, BasedWhat just kept outplaying, and it never really got going for Martin, and that's why it was a real shame in way to go out. But it was a pretty good game for BasedWhat, so kudos to him for basically outplaying Martin for the final two games and ended up taking the win. And the last game that had happened this week was Ron versus TX. Um, my notes started to my notes started to win here a bit, but let's check out the matches, shall we? Game one had an interesting type matchup. It was Bug versus Psychic, and you would think that TX may have the advantage here because Bug beat Psychic, and especially since he brought Volcarona, which carried Lumberry. However, he kept it as Bug Fire, which isn't really ideal, despite the stab benefits that it gets because Bug Buzz. I would much prefer Volcarona to be like, I don't know, Fire Grass or something like that. It was a mostly fair and well played game from either side. Unfortunately, Ron threw the end game. Ron threw the end game by Thunderbolting with Latias instead of, I don't know, going for something more powerful against Scizor. So he kind of choked game one that way. Game two, very hyper offensive. It was a very hyper offensive game with Aerodactyl, Azumarill, and Gardevoir all being very hyper offensive It was a very fast-paced series too. Endgame was really funny. Like the endgame was really funny with Togekiss trying to flinch Zapdos while being a toxic itself, to no avail, unfortunately. So TX was having problems there. Ron won. Game 3 used grass, which I've already complained before. Fortunately for Ron, grass proved very effective for this one. Ron played his superior and Mega Venusaur well. Like, he kept substituting and leaf storming and leech seeding at the appropriate times in order to take the win there. And Toge, once again, the end game. The end game again was really funny because it was down to TX's Togekiss trying to basically clutch the series by um, air slashing and flinching pretty much everything on Ron's team. But alas, Toxic Stall from Mega Venusaur, plus a couple of lucky breaks to heal and do synthesis, gave Ron the win, and that's why Ron took the series. Is that he? I don't know if it's I don't know if escaping a Togekiss flinch attack frenzy could be considered lucky, but Togekiss is Togekiss, so that proved the end for TX's pretty decent run, and Ron is moving on to the round of 8. And so we have reached round 8. Well, round of 8. Round 5. AKA the quarterfinals. Let's just call it the quarterfinals because that's what it is this was half quarters, thanks Crunchman, and this was quarterfinals. So let's get to predicting, shall we? So first off, we have 7992 versus Ainscred. Right. The tiers. The tier this time is almost any ability, same 10, pick 6. And these are the 10 Pokemon chosen by our host. We have Arcanine, we have Lurantis, Bagirna, Miltank, Moltres Galar, Stakataka, Togedemaru, Tornadus, Sarina, and Swampert. Some very interesting sets, I would think. Like, first of all, we got Flashfire Magearna or Levitate Magearna. You could get Sap Sipper Swampert. You can get Prankster Serena or something like that. Levitate Togedemaru. I'm just giving you all ideas at this point because I don't care. Uh, but yeah, those are just basically some examples for a Simpson Pick 6. Also, it'll be interesting to see what kind of team. Maybe there's going to be a support where Swampert and Magearna trade places and be Magic Bound Swampert along with Flashfire Magearna. That sounds kind of fun, don't you think? Anyway, predictions. 7992 versus Ainscred in AAA Same 10 Pick 6. Both players have been doing really well in this tournament. Ainscred now finally getting to play and show that he is a pretty good player. Against 7992, who has well established himself as one of the up and comers for the Tours Room community in general. So it's gonna be a fun. It's gonna be a fun series for these two. Who would I want to pick? Also, I forgot to mention that this is a rematch from BLT last year, in which 7992 beat Ainscred in 610 turns. Seeing the numbers 6 and 10 here in this tier, yeah, okay, that's irony. That is complete irony. Um, so who would win between 7992 and Ainscred? I think I'm gonna pick 7992. Why? I think I think 7992 comparatively between these two, I think is the better player. Especially in especially in a big OMM such as almost any ability. I think 7992 has Boyne definitely has the experience, but I think 7992 has the better play, which which could be good. Not gonna be surprised if Boyne wins. Maybe I'm predicting like a 55-45 win in, but yeah, I'm thinking I'm going with 7U992 on this one. All right, next up we have Ron versus the winner of the Ultra game versus Saba 111111. Um, well, LTG and Saba have yet to play, and I think I predicted Saba by a sliver to win last round. So Saba versus Ron, that's gonna be a fun matchup. I think it's gonna be a fun one. Um, who do I want to pick though? I think I'm gonna go with Saba. Ron's had a very impressive TPC run, and I'm very proud, and I respect the hustle from Ron 5 to make it this far into Torch Plaza Classic. But unfortunately, his run ends here. I think Saba has the potential to make semis of TPC, which, well, who knows? Who knows what a showing between Saba and Boyne or Saba versus 7U99 will happen. I think Saba will win this whole thing. Next up, Kether versus Euphanos. The top one versus top two of TPC. My favorite, which whoever wins here will win the whole thing. Let me guarantee you that. So this is also another rematch, I think, from TPP last year, and I think Kither won. So this is gonna be a fun one. This is gonna be a fun rematch to do. I think I want to go home. You know what? I'm feeling ballsy. I want to go Euphanos on this one because Euphanos tends to build some of the most whack creative sets known to humanity in this tour, and Kither, while still being a very good player and builder in his own right, how will he manage to handle the extreme unpredictableness of that is Euphanos? And that's going to be an interesting, fun one to see. And I think Euphanos will take the win. And I'm not going to be surprised if Kither wins, of course. But for my money, I'm thinking Euphanos.